I found out he was leaving through a Facebook event invite. Not a conversation, not a text, not even a passing mention. Going away picnic for Daniel, complete with a cute little airplane emoji and a candid shot of him in a straw hat laughing, my chest cracked open like dry wood. I stared at the screen, blinking hard, waiting for some kind of clarification, like maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a prank, but no. There were already 57 people marked going. A handful of comments talking about how excited they were for his big new chapter, how proud they were, how much they'd miss him. That was how I found out that Daniel, my best friend since I was 14, my first everything except officially, the boy I used to stay up late texting from under my covers, who kissed me once on New Year's and then blamed the champagne, was moving to Berlin. In 2 weeks. It felt like a silent car crash inside me. No sound, just the violent realization that something massive had happened and I hadn't seen it coming. He hadn't told me. Why hadn't he told me? I clicked through his profile like some obsessed stranger, hoping for answers. That's when I saw the photo he'd posted the week before, him and some tall, angular guy with his arms slung a little too confidently around Daniel's shoulders. The caption said, "Can't wait for the next adventure with you." I wasn't tagged. I didn't recognize the guy. The likes were full of people I barely knew, all apparently more in the know about Daniel's life than I was. And suddenly it all clicked. He wasn't just leaving the country. He was leaving me, so I did what any rational person does in the eye of emotional catastrophe. I went to his apartment, not like a casual drop-by. I stood outside his building at 11:42 p.m. with my hands shaking and a bottle of wine I'd barely realized I bought, praying he hadn't left early. When he opened the door in sweatpants and no shirt, hair still wet from a shower, I didn't even say hi. I just blurted out, "You weren't going to tell me." His face froze like a puppet mid-pull. "About Berlin," I added before the silence could crush me. That's when the real shock came, not the move, not the mystery guy, not even the wine I dropped and shattered when he didn't answer fast enough. It was what he said next, so quietly I almost missed it. "I was trying to protect you." Protect me from what? I didn't know then, but in that moment, standing barefoot in broken glass with red wine soaking into my jeans and tears I couldn't feel yet stinging the corners of my eyes, I realized this story wasn't about him leaving. It was about everything we'd never said and what I had 2 weeks left to say. I stood there in the hallway, stunned, the door still ajar as if waiting for me to make sense of it all. His words hung between us like a thick, invisible fog. "I was trying to protect you." What did that even mean? I searched his face for some clue, but all I could see was a mixture of regret and something else, something unreadable. He looked at me like I was the one he was trying to shield, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes, as if he too had just learned the weight of the unsaid words. Finally, after what felt like forever, I managed to say, "Protect me from what?" My voice cracked, the question tasting bitter in my throat. Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to find the right words that would somehow make this whole mess fit together. "From me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "From the fact that I've been in love with you for years, but I couldn't do this to you. I knew what it would do to you, to us. I saw it every time I looked at you and thought, this isn't fair." His words slammed into me like a speeding train, and for a moment I wondered if I was hearing things. In love with me. I shook my head, the absurdity of it all making my pulse spike. I had known Daniel, truly known him, for as long as I could remember, and yet in all that time I had never once considered the idea that he might feel the same way I did. The truth of it hit me like a tidal wave, crashing into every part of me I thought I understood. There was no denying it anymore. My heart had always raced around him. From the first time he smiled at me in that crowded high school hallway to the late-night conversations that somehow always ended with a lingering silence, full of the unspoken, but I had buried it. I had buried it so deep because there was no way he could feel the same. It never even occurred to me that the love I thought was one-sided was actually mutual. But now here he was, standing in front of me with his soul laid bare, and I realized I'd been running from something that had always been right in front of me. "Why didn't you tell me?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. It was a pathetic question, one full of all the hurt and confusion I felt. He looked down, his fingers tracing a pattern on the edge of the door, like he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. "Because I didn't want to destroy you," he murmured. "I didn't want you to have to choose between what we had and what could never be. I thought maybe if I just kept quiet, we'd keep being friends, that maybe I could go on pretending I didn't love you." His voice cracked on the last sentence, and I saw the depth of his pain. The kind of pain that only comes from holding in something you've wanted for so long but knew you couldn't have. The rawness of his confession turned my stomach, and I suddenly felt like I had no idea who this person in front of me was, and yet I recognized him more than anyone else in my life. It was a cruel kind of irony that I had spent all these years waiting for him to see me, waiting for him to wake up and realize what we could be. But now that he had, I was the one too paralyzed to take the leap. The door was open between us, but we both stood on opposite sides of it, unwilling to cross. We were like two people who had been waiting for the other to make the first move, and now it seemed too late. He was leaving, and I was just standing there. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I didn't know what to do with myself or with him. The words that had always been so easy to say when we were just friends felt foreign now, like they were coated in some kind of heavy dust, too afraid to even come out of my mouth. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came. He stood there waiting, his eyes softening as if he knew what was happening, knew that I was crumbling under the weight of his confession. His hands twitched at his sides, unsure of whether to reach for me to fix whatever damage had been done, but the space between us was too wide, too heavy, and it seemed impossible to bridge. Daniel, I finally managed, but the word felt empty, like it had no meaning anymore. How could I say his name like I used to when it had become tangled with so many unspoken truths? "You're leaving," I whispered, more to myself than to him. The truth of it felt like ice settling in my chest. He nodded slowly, but there was no conviction behind it, no certainty. "Yeah, I'm leaving," he said, his voice breaking. "But not because of you, not because of this. I thought that maybe if I left, you'd finally have a chance to find what you needed. To be with someone who can love you the way you deserve. I never wanted to stand in the way of that." His words were meant to be kind, to be selfless, but they landed with a sharpness that cut deeper than anything I expected. The image of him leaving, the reality of it, became clearer, more defined. He wasn't just going to Berlin for a new job, a new adventure. He was leaving me behind. And I had spent so long convincing myself that we were just friends, that the part of me that wanted more was a fantasy, a fleeting hope that would fade with time. But the truth was, I was just as much in love with him as he was with me. I had buried it for so long, telling myself that we could never be more than we were, that our friendship was enough. And now, in a matter of days, I would lose him, and it hit me, truly hit me, how wrong I had been all along. What if we could figure it out? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. The idea of him leaving had shattered me into pieces, and now I was desperate to put something together. He looked up, his eyes searching mine with a vulnerability that felt both terrifying and beautiful. "You want me to stay?" His voice cracked. I shook my head, the panic rising in my chest. I don't know what I want," I admitted. "I just know that I don't want to watch you go, knowing that I never told you how I felt. How I've always felt." The truth hung there, raw and naked, an open wound that I couldn't undo. He was silent for a long time, the kind of silence that pressed against your skin and made it hard to breathe. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the quiet battle that was playing out behind his eyes. I wanted to reach for him, but my body was paralyzed by the fear of rejection. What if this was just a moment of weakness for him? What if this was just one of those things people say in moments of desperation, but it didn't actually mean anything? My heart was racing in my chest, and I felt dizzy, caught between the desire to hold on to him and the knowledge that I had no right to keep him from chasing whatever it was he wanted. But then he did something that made my heart stop. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped toward me, closing the gap between us. He didn't say anything, but his eyes told me everything. He wasn't just hearing my words, he was understanding them. The air seemed to change, crackling with the electric tension of everything we had never said. His fingers brushed the edge of my sleeve, and it was as if the whole world stilled, waiting for us to make a decision. And suddenly I realized that this was it. The moment I had feared, the moment I had longed for, and the moment I had been terrified of all at once. There was no going back. I didn't know how long we stood there, inches apart, but it felt like an eternity. The world outside of this apartment, outside of this moment, seemed to slip away as if it no longer mattered. It was just the two of us, locked in a space that was both too small and too vast to contain everything we were suddenly facing. His breath was shallow, his hand still hovering near my sleeve, unsure whether it should go further. I could hear the pounding of my heart in my ears, a frantic rhythm that matched the frantic thoughts spiraling in my head. What do I do now? The fear gnawed at me, but deeper still was the yearning, the ache to reach out, to pull him close, to finally bridge the gap between everything we had been and everything we could be. But there was a voice in the back of my mind, one that had kept me safe for years, whispering that I couldn't risk it. Not now, not like this, not when the truth was too fragile. And then Daniel's fingers brushed mine, just barely, but it was enough to break the dam inside me. Without thinking, without considering the consequences, I reached for him. The way I always wanted to, the way I had dreamt of doing 1,000 times before. My fingers slid into his, and it was like electricity sparked through my veins. He didn't hesitate. He squeezed my hand and then in one fluid motion pulled me closer, so close I could feel his heartbeat through his chest. For a moment we just stood there, locked in this unspoken understanding, both of us trembling, both of us scared. And then without a word his lips were on mine, soft and tentative at first, like he was testing the waters. But I kissed him back, hungrily, desperately, as if we both had been waiting for this moment to shatter the walls we'd built between us. It was everything I had imagined it to be, and nothing like I had expected. His kiss was sweet and slow, but it held all the years of restraint we had both put into our friendship. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding, like the world outside our little bubble didn't matter anymore, like nothing mattered but this. His hand slid to my face, cupping it as though I might disappear if he didn't hold me there, and I let myself fall into him, into the feeling of being wanted, of being seen for the first time in the way I had always hoped. The world blurred his scent, the taste of his lips, the heat of his skin, all of it drowned out everything I had been holding on to. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again, and when he finally pulled away, his forehead resting against mine, we were both gasping for air, but there was no turning back. "I don't want you to leave," I whispered, the words slipping out with a rawness I didn't even recognize. The vulnerability felt foreign but real, like it had been building up for years, and I couldn't stop it now. His eyes searched mine, searching for something I couldn't even name, but his gaze softened when he spoke. "I don't want to leave either." His voice cracked, the weight of it too much to carry, and suddenly I realized just how much we had both been holding back. This wasn't just about Berlin anymore. This was about everything we had left unsaid, everything we had buried under the surface for so long. This wasn't just a moment of passion, it was years of longing, years of fear, colliding in a single, intense moment. But even as he said those words, I knew the truth. He was still leaving. Berlin wasn't just a city, it was the life he had chosen for himself. I wasn't part of that life, not in the way I wanted to be. And though we had just crossed the line between friendship and something more, the clock was ticking and the future was already set in motion. We both knew it, neither of us could change it, not really. The question now wasn't whether we could stop his departure, it was whether we could survive the pain of loving someone so completely and knowing that love would never be enough to keep them with you. The night stretched on, the weight of everything hanging in the air like a thick fog. We didn't speak for a while, just holding each other in the quiet, trying to breathe through the rawness of it all. My head rested against his chest, the steady beat of his heart echoing in my ears, a sound I could almost believe was permanent. But even in that silence, there was an understanding between us. We both knew how it ended. Berlin was still waiting, his flight was still booked. The life he was building was still calling to him. And I was still here in this apartment, tangled in the remnants of what could have been. There was no fairy tale ending here, no big gesture that would change the course of his future. I pulled away slowly, my fingers still lingering on his skin as if I were afraid he might disappear if I let go. The tears I hadn't felt earlier were finally making their presence known, burning down my cheeks in a quiet surrender. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered, my voice thick with the weight of everything unspoken between us. "How do I let you go? How do I let you leave knowing this, knowing everything we are?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch gentle and tender, a contrast to the storm we had just unleashed between us. "I don't know either," he said, his voice barely audible. "But I can't stay because of this. I can't stay because of what I've always wanted. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. We can't keep living in this unspoken place. I need to go to find something else. You need to find someone who can give you what you deserve, and I need to find what I'm supposed to do with all this love I've kept buried for so long." His words were a bitter kind of truth, and for a moment I hated him for saying them. I hated him for making this harder than it already was. But somewhere deep down, I knew he was right. As much as it hurt, he couldn't be the person I needed him to be. We couldn't keep pretending that we could have a future when the reality was so different. He stepped back, breaking the fragile connection we had only just begun to build. But then, in a move that surprised me, he cupped my face gently in his hands and kissed me again, slow and lingering this time, as if trying to memorize the feeling. When he pulled away, there was a finality in his gaze, something that told me that this was our goodbye, our one last chance to say everything we hadn't dared to say. "I'll always love you," he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. "But I have to go, and I think you have to let me go too." The words stung, but they were true. The tears that had been waiting in the wings finally spilled over, and this time I didn't try to stop them. I had spent years burying this love, convinced it would never be returned. And now, in the most excruciating way possible, I was realizing that maybe it was never meant to be. That maybe some loves weren't about the happily ever after. Maybe they were about timing, about letting go when you had no other choice but to do so. He stepped back toward the door, his bag slung over his shoulder, ready to walk into the life that would take him far away from everything we had known. And as he turned the handle, I whispered the only thing I could manage. Goodbye, Daniel. It was both an ending and a beginning, an acknowledgement that the love we'd shared would live on in different ways, in memories and dreams, but it would never be enough to stop him from leaving. As the door closed behind him, I knew that this chapter of our lives was over, and in the quiet, I allowed myself the space to grieve. Not just for him, but for the version of myself that had spent too long holding onto a love that was always destined to slip away.